wanted to go back a little bit to the idea of the therapeutic approaches,
Yeah.
because I think that's going to be tough, like for a lot of social workers. If you're doing counseling, that's kind of what you rely on for your competence. Like that's all you've learned how to do,
Yeah.
right? And it's what makes you a professional. Do you still use therapeutic approaches based on Western research, North American research, European research? And then does that mean that you change or modify them somehow for yourself?
I'll kind of speak generally because the work that I'm currently doing is not very much frontline or therapeutic work that I'm doing, but I do have a lot of experience engaging in that work. And I think that, those concepts and those frameworks and those theories that we use, again, are foundational to the work that we do. And I think that there's a lot of good in them and they help keep our interactions with folks who are accessing services like they keep them safer. They allow for like boundaries and they allow for relationships to progress without any conflicts or anything like that. So I want to kind of preface with that. And I think that there are many ways that folks can kind of like show up and implement a bit of themselves while using those frameworks and those theories, right? So in my opinion, before anybody kind of like went to school or read any books or watched any videos on any social work theories, frameworks, approaches, they were human beings first, right? We were human beings with the desire to help people before we learned all of this stuff. And I know for me, I didn't know, I just know I wanted to help people, right? And before I started my Bachelor of Social Work, I was just like a little snobby 17-year-old who was like, I'm already volunteering and I'm already helping people. Why do I need a degree to do it? If you're feeling like these theories are like, or these frameworks are really rigid, there's different ways. I'm struggling to think of like concrete examples. I've been in a position where, for example, I'm doing intakes and there's a certain amount of questions or things or amount of clients that I have to get through in a day, in a month in order to like meet organizational mandates and quotas, etc. Right? It's very challenging. The caseload was a lot. And I think for me, that's something that I had to do. But I think that if I was meeting with a client who would have rather talked about something that was really relevant for them today, a random example, honestly, is like I spent about like 10 minutes of an intake meeting talking about a movie that was really important to a client. And I think that's kind of like obvious, but I'm more so trying to speak to the idea that things can go off the rails. And although you're not meeting that quota or you're thinking like, I don't know how my manager or my boss is going to feel about this, something really therapeutic and transformational can happen if we let clients lead interactions, if we let clients kind of like talk about what they want to talk about. I actually, when I access therapy, right? There was a therapist that I met with years ago. And when I'm talking with her and when I'm sharing a hard story, she says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sweetie." Right. And so she used the term sweetie. And like, that's not a term that as a social worker that I would ever use. But when she used that towards me, I felt a bit more comfortable in opening up to her and talking to her because I felt like she was just she heard what I was saying and she was seeing me. And her response in calling me sweetie was like kind of like grounded in like our culture and like trying to help me feel comfortable. And I bring up that example because maybe, some workers might be uncomfortable using like jargon or like pet names like sweetie. I'm not encouraging anybody to say that, but more so saying that, if there's different like terms, slang, language, cultural things that are relevant to folks that we're working with, we can implement those into like the Western ways that we think about things and approach things as well.
If it's really natural to you, people are going to be able to tell. And if it's not natural, they're also going to be able to tell, right?
Yeah, exactly.